All right, so I have a very important question to start with. You guys tired of me yet, or what? No. No? All right, that's a good answer. Okay. Whew, there we go. So you guys know me by now. Slides. I'm Eric Guthrie, and partner coach in law group. For those of you that are coming online for the first time, I'll do a quick introduction. Partner coach in law group, director of training programs for the Government Blockchain Association, president Better Me, Better We, and I'm a certified GBA training partner, author of the book Blockchain or Die, an Amazon #1 bestseller, and winner of 3 awards, and there we go. Okay. That's my social media. I'll show it again at the end of the presentation, but if you want to connect with me, my social media and my GBA email. So, and that's everything I just basically said. Oh, and of course I teach the Blockchain Legal Specialist course, which I do about 3 or 4 times a year. So let's discuss blockchain legislation. Now I have a very short window because I'm sharing the stage with another speaker afterwards, Earl Hall, and I really want him to have enough time to give his presentation because it's great stuff. So I'm going to try and get through this in about 15 minutes. I'm going to pass the mic over to Earl, and he's going to take it on home. So you may be wondering, why are there clouds in this slide? Because it's going to be at a very high level, right? I don't have time to really do a deep dive into a lot of this legislation. So I'm really going to discuss this high-level trends, important topics, that kind of thing, and then go into regulations and state and then case law, and then we're going to go from there. So when I first started doing research for my book, Diversify or Die, I started reading a lot of legislation globally and a lot of statements from central banks all over the world. And I noticed a trend. The vast majority of them had a statement that had, for the main content, these 3 bullet points. Cryptocurrencies are not illegal or forbidden, that's number 1. Number 2, there's warnings about the risks associated with investing in cryptocurrencies and blockchain companies, number 2. And number 3, cryptocurrencies are not recognized in the country or considered legal tender of fiat currency or backed by the country's central bank. So the first is basically saying we're open for being used. The second is saying be careful because you could lose your money. And the third one is saying we're not taking any responsibility for this. This is a do it on your own. It's not anything that's endorsed or backed by the particular government. That's what I saw in the vast majority of the statements from central banks and regulators all over the world. So that's one high-level thing I wanted to point out. The second is bans on cryptocurrency and implicit bans, absolute bans and implicit bans. So you may be wondering, what's an implicit ban? An implicit ban is where it's prohibiting banks and other financial institutions from dealing in cryptocurrencies or offering services/businesses dealing in cryptocurrencies or banning cryptocurrency exchanges. That implicit ban is more of a big scale financial regulatory banking kind of ban. It does not ban use of cryptocurrencies person to person or perhaps small business, but when they get into the banking sector or when they get into a large scale cryptocurrency exchange sector, that's where you have some of these implicit bans taking place. Now, this is a very broad statement. Some of the bans have very specific requirements or actual banning language, country by country. We're not going to get into that. But that's what that is saying in that slide, implicit ban, absolute ban. Now, there were 8 absolute bans on this slide in 2018 and 15 implicit bans. I will make a caveat on this slide. This is where the beauty of GBA membership comes in. Yesterday, I was preparing this slide. Well, I wasn't preparing it, I was going over it. And 2 other GBA members that I'm very close to were like, well, tell us about what you're going to present. So I talked about the slide. They said, which countries are banned? So I gave the 8 countries that were banned on the slide. And then one of them said, and one of them is UAE. And one of them said, I don't think there's a ban in UAE. And I was like, really? And then we talked about it, and I recall there being a lot of stuff happening in Dubai with cryptocurrencies. And I was like, you're right. But according to the Library of Congress, On their exact quote, and that's a poll from the Library of Congress slide, UAE is listed. So what's the lesson here with the government? Trust but verify. Because they may not be right, okay? So I make that caveat because it was support of GBA members. You know, we support each other. We educate each other. We work with each other. That made this presentation so much better, because otherwise that slide may not have had the exact information that you should have, and you watching all over the world should have as well. So 8 absolute, 15 implied. Question, you know me, I like to be interactive with the audience. Do you think the bans increased or decreased between 2018 and current day? What do you think? How many think increased? Raise your hand. How many think decreased? Raise your hand. Okay, so about a 2-to-1 ratio. Most plead for increase rather than decrease. Here's the answer. Non-absolute bans, so the absolute bans went up by 1 with the caveat of UAE, and 42 implicit bans. So the implicit bans almost tripled, assuming, of course, that this data is 100% accurate, because what did I say before? Trust but verify, right? So you see now that more countries are doing implicit bans when it comes to cryptocurrencies, and using it for banking and large-scale institutions, and perhaps even for cryptocurrency exchanges. So the question is, why the implicit bans? I have one word for you, which is just my opinion, not the opinion of GBA, not the opinion of a coaching law group, yada, 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 all the disclaimers. Protection of governmental systems and banking systems. Right, think about it. If there's any threat or danger to their system, it's the use of it with large banks, Federal Reserves, or their version of Federal Reserves in those countries, right? And if it's cryptocurrency exchanges, it's providing a much more robust exchange of currencies, which they can pull from their banking system. So that's my personal, I have not read this anywhere. That's just when I think about it. What did I say in my first presentation? Issue spotting, right? So that's what I think is the issue with the increase in implicit bans. Now, I didn't make the slide for this next statement I'm gonna make, and this is kind of, I won't say it's a soft pitch, but this is why GBA is so important. Because if we can get out and educate, all over the world, that we can be educating you, we can be providing you with your options that make sense both from a regulatory standpoint, a legislative standpoint, a banking standpoint, then maybe these implicit bans won't be so prevalent or increase anymore, right? So that's something I think that we should be aspiring to as an organization, and members of the organization as well. Money transmittal laws. This is a really important topic when it comes to regulation, because a lot of this has an impact on a statewide level. Now, there's 2 levels of money transmittal laws. There's the federal level for money transmittal laws, which is basically preventing money laundering, KYC AML, right? Of course, it's very uniform because it's federal. Now, on the state level, it's not so much for money laundering, but it's more so for consumer protection, right? The premise is they want to make sure that you're not using whatever cryptocurrency in a manner that's going to defraud the citizens of that state. So money transmittal laws are very, very important to understand from a legal perspective. So when I have clients coming to me talking about, hey, I want to set up an exchange, or I'm thinking about creating this kind of, the flow between cryptocurrencies, and I say, what state are you talking about doing it in? Because some states are very rigid with the money transmittal laws, and other states are not. So you got to know what state you're dealing with to be in compliance with that state. And if you're dealing with multiple states, right, the trick may be to just pick the state with the highest level of strictness or restrictiveness, and just use that level, so that way you won't be failing in any other states when it comes to money transmittal actions. And guess what also counts under money transmittal laws, which we also cover under the Coach and Law Group? Bitcoin ATM machines, right? Cryptocurrency machines also fall under that purview as well. So this is very important to know and understand, especially if your business is looking into doing this or is already doing it. Make sure you have all your legal ducks in a row. So there's hundreds and hundreds of legislation out there when it comes to cryptocurrency at the state level. I just picked a few. I'm probably not going to go through all of them, but I just picked a few that I thought A, were very interesting, and B, were specifically pertaining to legal structures or legal issues. For example, in Vermont, fact or record verified through blockchain authenticity for use in court proceedings. Really interesting. So now, blockchain records can be used in court proceedings. And the second one, which I think is kind of a addendum to it, Vermont Senate Bill 269 enables blockchain records to be governed under the authentication, admissibility, and presumptions required under the Vermont Rules of Evidence. That's huge. That's huge for Vermont. Now, I don't know how many cases this may apply to in Vermont, but the very fact that they put that on the books is huge for the legalities of blockchain technology, especially when it comes to the rules of evidence. Another one, Connecticut. I find this one to be very interesting. House Bill 5210 prohibits the use of non-compete agreements in the blockchain technology industry. So I read that and I was like, I wonder what would actually give them the impetus to have that kind of law on their books, House Bill 5210. So I thought through it and I said, I think I know why. And I didn't read this anywhere, and again, this is not the opinion of GBA, the Kosher Law Group. A non-compete agreement, if you guys know what that is, basically is saying you're an employee with an organization, and your input to what they're doing as a company is so important that if you leave and took the knowledge with you to somewhere else, that it would be hurtful to them because of your knowledge and what you've already given to that organization from your intellectual property. Here's the caveat. The blockchain industry is so small. If you have a non-compete agreement with a company, the one thing that non-compete agreements cannot do is they cannot keep you from getting work anywhere else. But in theory, a non-compete agreement in Connecticut for blockchain technology could basically destroy your opportunities for employment anywhere else, right? This is all my opinion. So I thought that's why they passed Senate Bill 5210. I also like the Nebraska law, LR 164. That creates an interim study to explain the need to update insurance laws in response to technology advancement and innovation, and the study would review the interaction of insurance regulation and blockchain technology. When we talk about forward-thinking legislation, I think this is an important thing to point out, right? Because in Nebraska, they're already predicting by creating this study that blockchain technology may have a very impactful impact on insurance in that state. So that being the case, they want to figure out how it's going to impact it. Now, if I'm in the insurance industry and I read that Nebraska law, I say to myself, wow, wait a minute. What's this blockchain thing, and why is it so important that they made a law about it for my state, right? And there'll be a presentation later on about, forward thinking and the future of legislation. I think this kind of legislation, which could be modeled by other states, is a sign that blockchain technology is going to be hitting many other industries, and some of them that are already heavily regulated, like insurance, may become part of that thought process. So, blockchain case law. There's very, very few cases when it comes to blockchain case law, and I break it up into two categories. The first category is case law that still uses existing case precedent to determine an issue or resolve an issue with whatever plaintiff and defendant come to court presenting, and the second being actual law with actual blockchain issues, for example, code, smart contracts, things of that nature. So the three big categories, and we're not going to go through these cases, but you have them for a reference. The three big categories of cases that I've seen so far are fraud, intellectual property, and unregistered securities, okay? So fraud is obvious because, like we discussed yesterday with ICOs, there was a lot of fraud going on there. You can go on the SEC website and read a lot of the investigative reports that SEC did, okay? Fraud was really big. Hopefully not as big now, but back in the Wild Wild West of the ICO days, it was pretty big. IP, it's also very big because, like I said in my earlier presentation, blockchain technology can have a very, very big impact on intellectual property. But not just the impact in terms of the technology, also how we use the names. Oracle versus Crypto Oracle. So I'm sure when Oracle saw Crypto Oracle out, they weren't very happy about that, that very close, nomenclature to their own name. And unregistered securities, we've already seen that. And you see there's the Ripple class action mentioned there. There's actually more than one Ripple class action. So there's a lot going on with those cases right now. But there's a bunch of other cases dealing with, whether or not a cryptocurrency or token is a registered or unregistered security. So those are just three categories of cases that are not specific to the actual technology of blockchain technology. But let's go through, I think I have two cases here that are of interest. So the crypto exchange ZG Top lost 300,000 Tether and 100 Ether in a hack of its platform. By tracing the transaction trail, ZG Top followed the stolen cryptocurrency to a single account with Bittrex, a competing exchange. To locate the account holder, a believed hacker, ZG Top sued the unknown Doe, whoever owned that wallet, and asked the court for expedited discovery from Bittrex. How do you think the court ruled in that case? This is more interactivity here. How do you believe the court ruled in that case? How many of you think they ruled for discovery, compelled discovery? Raise your hand. How many think they ruled to deny discovery? Raise your hand. Okay, it's a little more on the deny part. And this goes to one of the questions I had earlier on about wallets, and I forgot who asked it, but this is the case I was referring to in my second session. The court ruled for discovery. That's powerful stuff, right? And now they're going to go forth and try and find out the owner of that wallet, who they call, in this case, Doe. Next court case. See, I like that silence, right? I said, let's process that for a minute. It's really important stuff. This is a case of first impression. So now discovery requests have a precedent to back it up, okay? Next one, Florida versus Espinoza. This is actually a very recent case. Undercover detectives contacted the defendant through a Bitcoin exchange site. Espinoza posted on the site that he would sell Bitcoins for cash through in-person transactions. Espinoza was not licensed for registered as a money services business with Florida or federal regulators. An undercover detective met Espinoza several times and paid him a total of $1,500 cash for Bitcoin, and even said he was involved in an illicit activity. And by the way, Espinoza made some money off that transaction with that $1,500. So how do you think the appellate court ruled? Is Bitcoin money or is Bitcoin not money? Now, if Bitcoin is money, Espinoza needs a money transmittal license. If Bitcoin is not money, Espinoza does not. So how many think the court in Florida ruled, the appellate court, that Bitcoin is money? Raise your hand. Okay, how many think that rule is not money? Raise your hand. Okay, excellent. I love this. This is some great conversation. The court ruled that Bitcoin is money and requires a money service business license. But caveat, the court, that was on appeal. The first court ruled that Bitcoin was not money. And then there was an appeal by the state of Florida to the appellate court to review that ruling from the lower court. So as you can see, the courts are even split right now within the state of whether or not Bitcoin is money. So it's fascinating stuff. And quite frankly, it may get appealed from there. Who knows, right? But what I'm trying to get the point across here with case law is it's still in development. Even the court's trying to figure it out. And when people come up to me and say, well, it's obvious that this is the case and the court's going to, I'm like, no, it is not obvious. The courts can't even decide themselves on what to do. How many of you guys have heard about Supreme Court decisions that are 5-4 or 6-3? Courts, you could be split within a court or appellate courts 2-1 decisions. This stuff is not obvious. Don't take it for granted, right? Because right now it's still being worked out through the system.